Hello, good afternoon, good evening, good morning to all the ships at sea, and welcome to Fanboy Planet. And it is October, so I think almost everything that I'm going to do, as it's already been becoming anyway, is Halloween oriented. So, what better way to kick that off than to talk with the creator of Halloween Man, Drew Edwards? Drew, welcome.
Howdy. Good to be
Howdy.
back.
Yeah, we had you on a few months ago, and you were talking about GlobalComix, and that's with an X. That is the digital comic shop that you have moved a lot of your material, if not all, at this point over to.
All of it at this
Yeah,
point. Yeah.
and you're here now because you've got a Halloween Man, Halloween special cosmic crossover called Entropy. So let's first just talk about the book a little bit, where people can find it, and again, the gorgeous art. So I want to name check the artist.
Well, the comic is going to be coming out on October 18th. We are really proud of this thing. It's been a long time coming. I actually first, when I wrote the story uh, nearly 6 years ago now. So, like, actually seeing it sort of come to life has been really gratifying. Um, it's sort of our version of Crisis on Infinite Earths, but with a decidedly horror bend to it. And I've been seeding this story now for years. And in fact, actually, all of the issues that have led up to this and that will play into this are currently for free on Global Comics. So you don't have to subscribe or
Wow.
anything. Yeah. You can just go check it out and be like, okay, I've boned up on everything I need to know to read this book when it comes out on the 18th. And I'm again, I just have to say I'm really excited. You brought up Jason Wilson, who is the penciler on this. He is a megawatt talent, one of the best artists that I've ever had the privilege to work with. And this honestly is the best work I've ever seen from him. Like, you can tell he was just having a great time drawing everything from Superman type superheroes to headless horsemen to giant flying coffins to dinosaurs and everything in between, because the story has a lot of different elements as befitting something that is sort of the Hallowtide version of Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's a lot of different styles, and as much as I love Crisis on Infinite Earths as you do, and many do, it's interesting though. I'd say this is, yes, more of a horror bent, but Crisis is kind of a horror story when you realize how many trillions, quadrillions of life forms die. Uh, yes, and there is a coffin in the sky, which reminded me a lot of Avengers Endgame. I mean, the appearance of Thanos. And I know I'm getting the wrong one of the two. Infinity War.
Yeah.
There we go. Yeah, never quite recovered from COVID up here, but it's so this is the most horror straight up because it's Halloween Man, but you do have a superhero universe. And I want to say, in the spirit of Crisis on Infinite Earths, uh, as great as it is that you have all those back issues ready for people and free on globalcomics.com, I don't think you need to read them. You should, by all means, because they're fun. But I had no problem following along. Like, I dip in and out of, I have several downloaded to read of your back issues. And I knew you'd worked with some of these characters, but it was just fun. I
Well,
sensed where it was coming.
thank
So
you.
let's talk about the inspirations in your high praise, because one of the artists you've worked with was Nicholas Scott. So the other thing about reading Halloween Man is you will find tomorrow's superstars today when you read Halloween Man. And so, uh, how old were you when Crisis on Infinite Earths hit?
Oh, wow. I am 45.
You
as
didn't. Okay, you could have made them do the math. I didn't want to out you on your age.
no, it's fine. I have no, I have a baby face, so I'm okay
Oh,
with it.
this is true. Okay, yeah.
It's not the years, it's the mileage, as Indiana Jones says. Um, so I am 45. Geez, so I would have been,
Well, it's 38 years ago. So
man, math is hard when you ask me on the fly.
you were 7. I just
I
did it.
was
I bet.
7 years old. Wow, that's a good comic reading age, though. I think.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, and there's the point. If you were 7, you didn't know who 3/4, if even 1/4 was as much of who those people were and why it
Oh no.
mattered. But it was so good.
The thing that I think was exciting about Crisis when I first read it is that it sort of just tossed you into the DC universe and the larger DC multiverse, and it said sink or swim. And I think, and I must say, a big believer in comic book outreach. I think that we need to constantly be trying to make stuff new reader friendly, but I do kind of disagree with what everybody says makes something new reader friendly. Like there's this idea that continuity or lots of characters can be a turnoff. But I can tell you, when I started reading comics, I was fascinated by all the characters, and looking at Crisis, it just made me want to know more about the DC characters, because at that point, basically all I knew about the DC universe was the Linda Carter Wonder Woman show and the Christopher Reeve Superman movies. So, like, I mean, keep in mind, this is a few years even before the Tim Burton Batman. So, like,
Hmm.
I hadn't really explored the Batman thing outside of reruns of the Adam West show. So, this Crisis really, it felt big, and the expansive cast was fascinating. And honestly, it was a big concept, though. And I'm going to throw out the term superhero horror. And I think you were right to say that there is an element of that in Crisis, because when you're a kid and you're reading that, the idea that these worlds are just being wiped out, like, very methodically, that's a big, huge idea to a
Hmm.
kid, and it felt very scary. Like and that the villains were so powerful that they could even keep all these different versions of Superman at his paces. Like that was scary. That was, again, it felt huge, and that's the way it was supposed to feel. Um, so when crafting this story, um that's the feeling that I wanted to tap into, that sort of sense of almost nihilism about what's going on, because the villain in this story is going from universe to universe and wiping them out, almost like a serial killer would kill a person. And you know really, all of that, what I'm trying to do with this is go back to that uncomfortable feeling that I got when I first read Crisis, because it was both exhilarating and scary, and I want to see if I can make my own readers feel that same way.
That is fair. Again, yeah, a lot of I'm thinking back to Crisis. I have not read it in a long time, but it was the first of these big mega crossovers and the best. And you introduce a bunch of characters if people haven't read, the book on a regular basis. That again, you grasp who they are. That's how I felt. Even before Crisis, like I would buy those 100-page JLA super spectaculars because they'd have, or that they would have a Justice Society story in the back, Seven Soldiers of Victory, and there'd always be one weird character I'd never ever heard before, and that's the one I'd latch on to. So I love that feeling. I definitely got it. You know that your entire universe is kind of condensed down into this one book, and this one issue so far. And I think you told me, like, I don't even have the actual final, right? Like, you're still
No.
tweaking some dialogue and stuff. So
Well, that's the fun thing about doing a something that is released digitally first, is that as a creative team, we can tweak it right up to when the release date. And yeah, what the review copy that I sent you, it's not complete, but because we're still changing things up, and we're still adding adjustments to the color and adjustments to the dialogue. And the fact that we're able to do that really amps up our creative game. Because like just yesterday we were talking about John Gulson, who does the coloring on this. He was talking about how in uh, there's a panel where Solomon, Halloween Man, gets zapped by a villain, and the energy is described as gray energy. And he was like, "Well, is it here it is as it reads in the script, but you know if Jason will permit me, can I kind of trace over his line work to give it a little bit more, because this way it kind of looks like smoke. This will sell the idea of it being energy more." And this is an example of what makes comics great, is that collaborative process, but also the fact that we're less than a month of away of releasing it, and we're still bouncing ideas off of each other. We're still able to go in and change things, and frankly make it better, because my job as the writer, but also in this case a bit like the publisher, is to put out the best possible comic. And of course I could have the ego in that moment and go, no, what is in my script is gospel and we will not change that. But so John and Jason, they were right to suggest that change, because the change makes the story better. And I'm a storyteller first and foremost, and I want to tell the best story we possibly can. And that's why I love comics, and that's why I love collaborating with people.
right, you chose a very collaborative medium, and people listen up. This is how you get a reviewer to still buy your book when it comes out. You just make sure it's not done. Uh, but it's interesting you say it, because I've seen in a couple of social media platforms comics creators talking about this, how, like, you kind of have to get it done on this deadline, and it's locked, and then it's published, and then people think, oh, that wasn't as good as it could have been, or a bad page. Whereas with digital, you have a greater opportunity to fix it before anybody sees it, because it's last minute up to publication. That's pretty awesome. So let's say, what are are there some other of those giant crossovers? Because you mentioned there were that, that's inspired by more than just that. I see uh, Infinity Saga, whichever Jim Starlin crossover you want to, a little bit, because of Entropy being a figure much like.
Thanos.
I haven't seen Entropy yet, but like Thanos in conception. So where are the other ones that gave you joy as a kid too? Because
you
Secret
know
Wars was not as expansive. It was good, but it was not as expansive. They were trapped. And
Certainly, the Starlin stuff, over at Marvel. Secret Wars, yes. Also the more recent Hickman Secret Wars, because it taps in, like, one of my favorite tropes in comics is the multiverse, and I love, like, the idea of, like, the darker timeline variants and things like that. It's weird that the multiverse as a concept has become so mainstream now, actually, because when I actually wrote the script, it's still like the Flash TV show had just kind of gotten started, and the Marvel MCU stuff hadn't really started dealing with the multiverse as a concept. So um I was really leaning into stuff like What If, stuff like
Hmm.
Elseworlds, um but also stuff that doesn't deal with that multiversal concept. I was a big fan of the death of Superman when it first came out. Like it, I was still young and naive enough that I thought he wasn't going to come back. So again,
Oh,
that was something else that felt big. And that sense of gravitas is something that I am pulling from, but also because my universe is much more centralized on this one particular group of characters.
yeah.
Like you kind of get to see the larger superhero world that they live in a little bit in this one. You get to see more of the Sentinels of Justice, which is their local superhero team. Um, but at the end of the day, it's all about Halloween Man. It's all about Lucy. It's a personal story too, because this particular villain um, puts a strain on their relationship in a particular way. And when you get to the last page of the issue, I think you'll all understand why. And I think that this is a bad guy that is, or should I say bad girl, that is going to intrigue people in ways that a lot of our other villains have not.
Okay. And you brought up being naive, like with Death of Superman. Will the consequences of this story remain? Because you're right. Like, after Superman died and came back, and then Batman got his back broken, and he was replaced, and he got healed. Let's not talk about how. And it's just when a kid now reads a comic, like in one of the big two, as fun as it might be, you just know everything is going to get undone. And even in DC with Crisis on Infinite Earths, in 3 or 4 years now, if that long, they're going to wipe it out again and
Yeah.
restart. And I say that with love. I I still read a lot of them, but I know they. It's hard to get invested in them. You know.
So I don't want to reveal too much, but I will say that there is lasting ramifications, although they're probably not the sort of ramifications that you would think. Again, this is ultimately, even though we are invoking, you know, big superhero smash 'em up crossovers, because this is ultimately an indie comic that is more character driven, the ramifications shall also be character driven. But I think people will like where this sends our characters. I think that people will find the direction that we're going in to be intriguing. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about doing an indie book is, when I change something, I can make it count, and I can make it really count, and it can last. It's not the same as like with Superman coming back, or Batman coming back, or Captain America, any one of those characters that has
Mhm.
died and then come back. And I'm not knocking those stories, because there's things that are wonderful about mainstream superhero comics, and they're
Oh yeah.
what got me into reading comic books and into the field of comic books. But as an indie creator, I do get to follow my own heart a little more.
Yeah. So that is Halloween Man Entropy coming out October 18th.
October 18th on the GlobalComix platform.
Well, excellent. Drew, thanks for joining in a conversation, and I'm looking forward to the success, and I'm looking forward to, of course, reading the final version of this. And happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
Thanks for watching. Please hit the subscribe button to make sure you don't miss out on any Fanboy Planet video content. And visit fanboyplanet.com for other features, reviews, interviews, previews, and of course, listening to the Fanboy Planet podcast. And remember, use your powers for good.